through when time is a bit tough or get to a solution quicker, faster. A lot of these leaders, whether it's director or team leader, always started with a story. And if you personalize that, that has been a huge factor of success. As a leader in whatever environment that you're in, you need to spend a bit of time to understand who your people are and how to communicate with them and how the best way to get something out of that. And that is done through great storytelling. And we're not all great storytellers, but we all have stories to tell.
Well, let's get the show on the road. So welcome to the podcast, Ben. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Henry.
I think we were just talking then. You've had such an interesting career so far and quite unique experiences. It'd be awesome to get your take on that too and your journey so far and where you're now at in regards to the work you're doing with Liminal.
Yeah, I say my journey began in Canada, Ottawa, Ontario. And I was always fascinated with the Olympics, and growing up, I remember watching the Olympics and all these sports and all these amazing athletes. And you're like, oh my God, you see them almost as superheroes. But the one that really gravitated to me was gymnastics. So I started to do gymnastics at around 10. So it's a little bit older starting, but I excelled fairly quick. I figured out real quick that if you're semi good at this and you're willing to put in the hours and grind through the hard times and celebrate the highs and learn from something the lows, I figured that I craft myself at a pretty good level there in gymnastics. So I ended up there in my career, I think I was 16 or 17 as junior champion in Canada. And I think that got the eye of, by then, we're looking into 95, 96. Cirque Du Soleil was the company that was being built, and they were starting casting and they were trying to increase their talent pool as they were building new shows. So I got casted from Cirque at one of my national championships. And I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but then I sat down with my parents and they were looking like, okay, well, you got choices. You're really good at this. I know what you want. You're very accelerated. You do something. So let's just go see what they have to offer. So to make a long story short, found myself going to Montreal at the headquarters over there and realized I was like, oh my God, this is serious business. Preconceived thoughts of like animals and circus, all that stuff, we just very, very quickly went out the window. And I was like, oh, I think I belong here. I got something to say. And you're 17 years old. You're the best in Canada in gymnastics in my category. Ego's huge. I can do this. But dove in there and then found myself being mentored by some great people and surround myself with amazing other athletes where there was no common ground. We all were expert in our fields: gymnasts, dancers, divers, synchronized swimmers, singers, movers, acrobats, circus performers. But the way that it really gelled my interest and kind of came to like one of the key principles that we'll talk a little bit later on is with the environment that we were in, none of us was expert. So therefore we got really locked into like awareness. Oh, where are we? Oh, I'm not so good anymore because my tricks don't mean nothing until I can evoke an emotion or get the director or the choreographer to be like, that's what's it. So I found that really fun. That was my first big transition, going pretty much gymnastics, if you want to consider that almost a black and white, like X equals, and when you went into the circus world and the performance art world, there was so many layers of colors that could bring in. And that gave you so much more opportunities to expand on your emotional range, your performance range, your story, body, physically, mentally, however you wanted to develop. And it was a melting pot of culture, right? Coming in from Canada, the demographic of young gymnasts, you pretty much fit in a box. And when we got there, the box was so much bigger, right? So that was great. And then to take the leap of faith, trust the process, made a lot of great friends and found myself in Vegas as a 17, 18-year-old and performed a few thousand shows, then also performed at La Rev, the show at the Wynn Las Vegas. So after about 2,000, 2,500 shows under my belt and a few surgeries, I figured, hey, I might want to start thinking of something else here. My dues were paid. I was credible. I did these shows. I taught the process. So I was like, how can I give back and maybe accelerate some of these new people? So then I quickly shifted into head coach. So I took some of my learnings as an athlete turned to performer, now turned to coach. I was like, how can I reach these amazing other performers and artists? And how can I give them a couple of insight and tools that maybe help me and I can accelerate their process and then so on, just to start that momentum. So I did that for a few years and found myself back in Montreal at the headquarters where I had different hats, acrobatic choreographer, performance designer, and ended up my career there just at COVID as a creative director at Cirque. But through the years, obviously great communities, collaborate with great communities. And that's where I got to meet a couple of my partners that were presently here with Liminal Collective, Dr. Andy Walsh, who was at Red Bull by then. And we did some collaboration where we got Cirque, the Circus Arts, meeting, with the Red Bull athletes and high adrenaline athletes. And there was a lot of fun conversations and also a little program that we built throughout the years, and that's kind of where I thought, oh, there's something bigger here. How can we accelerate the learning? Because that's the edge, right? The competitive edge is how can you get there quicker, faster, better, stronger, and clearer? And then if you're able to figure out that matrix and do that, then you're going to have the edge and it's going to give you an advantage, whether it is in creativity, whether it's performance, whether it's in business, whether it's in medicine, and so on and so forth. High performance is high performance regardless of your vertical. So that's kind of what brought us up today, where we're here with Liminal Collective. We're really trying to take the lessons learned from all of our backgrounds, because we're a very eclectic group: military, sport, business, entertainment, medicine, and the arts. And how can we inspire, entice, and give some learnings and insights to whoever is willing to learn and wants to try a few different things to hopefully either inspire them, give them a good story to tell, and then at the end of the day, elevate the human potential altogether. So that's a quick synopsis of my background and where we're at today. I'm glad to be here with you, Henry, and see what great nuggets we can pull out of this conversation and hopefully help and inspire some of the listeners.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, just hearing that then and hearing you speak about what your mission now is, it's so aligned actually with the podcast itself. So it's awesome that we've got you on and we can really delve into some of those areas. And it was interesting. It was interesting that you mentioned around learning as quick as possible, because there was a guest a few weeks back called Scott Draw, who was head of research and innovation for Team GB over 5 Olympic cycles. And he gave a quote, which I think he was re-quoting, but he basically said, innovation is the only sustainable competitive advantage. And obviously, the speed at which you can innovate requires certain precursors. And I think people naturally understand the need for creativity in performing arts. But what is creativity to you, and why is it crucial in the business world?
Well, creativity / or creatives, first of all, I think we need to demystify things. A lot of people don't consider themselves creative people. But if you really slow down, pause for a second, pull it, take a knee, and say how creative, because creativity, we deal with creativity every day, whether it's a young mom that's at home and wakes up and you got to create quick food for your kids to go to school. You're getting creative. How can I do with what the ingredients that I have right here, right? Or, you're going for a walk and you're like, oh, it's really nice here. I'm out in nature. How about if I go right? Oh, and then you start. So we all naturally do it. That's saying not everybody consider themselves creative, but I think they are. I think there's different levels of it. But if we want to talk about creativity, I think creativity is almost like a muscle. Everybody has it, but the more you work on it, the more that you surround yourself in it, then it gives you a creative edge. Whether you need it, whether you don't need it, we all naturally do it. But like I said, some people don't. You call it creativity. You call it just like, hey, I got an idea, or hey, I figured this. Not how you tap into your creative flow state. I know that I need to be in this mood in order to really be at my best. How do I creatively get into that? How do I almost trick my brain, and all of a sudden I find myself there faster than I was yesterday? So I think that's also an interesting conversation. But also, how creative can you get when things don't go so well? When you take the lessons learned, you fall on your trick, the pitch doesn't go well, the show stumbles. I think there's a moment you gotta obviously take that in and make sure that it's safe and you can move on. But at some point, the sooner that you're able to turn that trigger, say, okay, what can I learn from this, and how creative can I get in order for this not to happen again? Or since this happened, did that spark a new idea that maybe we could do this? Because I'm a big believer that everything happens for a reason. You need to capture the essence of that to almost like the very, very, very specific trigger or point of it. And from there, you can either be a pessimist and say, no, I didn't learn anything. This sucks. And yeah, we all do it, and we'll keep doing it. That's one aspect. But I think that where the elites and the people that are forward thinkers play is that they're able to hit that little bottom, but then switchly turn into like, okay, what can I learn from it? And why happen? And then once you get in that aspect, then you are in a completely different mindset where you are being creative because you're already thinking of the next step and how can you learn and go forward, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing there is creativity enables you to innovate, whether that's conscious process or whether it's just purely the result of maybe a failure or a success and reflecting on that. What do you think in regards to the business world creativity can bring for companies?
Well, somebody said, and I was just talking with Andy this morning, I can't remember who, so I'll have to get it, but they said the more ideas company have, the more innovative they can become. Right. So I think that is definitely a statement worth looking into. And again, it comes back to creativity as a muscle. The more you work on it, the more that you surround yourself in it, pushing yourself and working that muscle of self-awareness. Where am I here right now? What's the environment? What am I triggering? What's my emotion state? What are my behaviors when I'm in this state? So all I think are fundamental if we really want to push human performance or human potential, because we live in a data world. We have so much data. Everybody's an expert. We're pushing on that. And Dr. Duncan French, a friend of ours at the UFC, pretty much said it the same. He said, we have so much data that the edge is going to be how creative can you get with that data and apply it for the specific need to that individual or that group. Now, whoever cracks that code or spends a little bit more time in that field, I think is pushing the envelope and pushing the edge as far as what is possible. And what is possible can be for you, Henry, something for me is very different. And that can move. That's a target that can move. And I think if you don't get yourself blindsided and see too narrow down the pathway and you open up at some point when things go right and things go wrong, I think you're definitely going to find some creative edge. I don't know if it makes sense, but creativity for me is almost a tool. So it becomes like a hammer. Like you can decide, you don't always have to use it, but the more that you think about it, the more you try to think of how can I apply it, then you spark innovation. And then once you have innovation, then you're somewhere new. And then when you're somewhere new, you have to realize where you're at and what's needed and what's missing. And then you return the cycle a little bit. So that's a fun aspect of it. Falls a little bit as the creative process. Creativity within the creative process, depending where your state, whichever state or step you are in. I think that's the edge. It seems that a lot of these high performance companies and communities put the reps and put the time into learning like health, wellness. What do I need this? But they haven't spent a lot of time and a lot of effort into creativity or how creative can I get or how can I get my crew, my individual, my group, my team as creative as possible. So I think that's where we find Liminal, we're really trying to play because there's something there, there's opportunities and there's gaps. And I think when we can figure that out, then we can ideally come out with some tools and insight and then give that to the community, democratize the idea of human optimization, and then sprinkle a little bit of creativity on top of that.
That's awesome. Yeah. So you've debunked for us, in essence, that nature or nurture argument. You know, we would label maybe some people as creative and others, even ourselves, as not creative. You've said that it can be something that you nurture. But what are the conditions that you've noticed needed for creativity? Do there seem to be any sort of universal frameworks for that or steps that you take? Or is it very individual and requires almost an explorative process? I
think we're all different depending on where you grew up, your culture, your upbringing, the space that you're in, introvert, extrovert. So we're all very different. But regardless, I think there's some key pillars here as far as if you want to stimulate or engage with creative thoughts first or creative idea that sparks afterwards and creates some momentum. So I think that to your point, nature is definitely a great catalyst to get creative. And it's proven if you see a bunch of kids playing on a tarmac outside in the schoolyard, like there's certain things that are going to stay, but then you take those same kids and you bring them into nature outside for a hike and all of a sudden a branch, a twig, things becomes fun. And then the imagination goes. And once your imagination goes, and if you're aware of that, then I think that's a good sign of like, okay, I'm in a good space. So I think it's just an experience that you have to constantly do. And your 1, 2, 3s, depending on where you're at in your life and your mood and your behaviors and your state of mind can shift to. But I'm obviously coming from the entertainment and sports, and my bias as far as what are some main things? Well, definitely outdoors is a nice trigger. Music is a big trigger for me. We use music a lot because what connects us as human beings, regardless of what your craft is. If we look at ancient wisdom and ancient rites, a passage, it's food, it's music, and it's stories, right? So that don't matter if you're speaking the same language, if you end up someplace and there's some food or some drinks and there's some music, it's going to catalyze some kind of conversation. So music is definitely a big thing. And what's fun to do, and it might seem weird a little bit, but just spending a bit of time with kids. I have kids too. And just they have no boundaries. As we grow older, we put our own guide rails on and they become tight. And at that age, whether you have all the best toys in the world or whether it's Tupperware in a bath, they're going to get creative. So I'd say those three things are definitely some place to start and then figure what works. I'm big into just surrounding myself, like connecting with other people. There's just an energy and frequency. Whether it's my business partners, Rich and Tone Taluega, like I know with them, every time we get together and we start talking, like there's just something, we can't see it, can't feel it, but there's an energy that we get like, we could do this and that, and just naturally convert into imagination and creative conversation. What if happens? So I'll just say that. I'd say those things are definitely ways to start. And then as an individual, if certain things don't work right away, don't brush it off just yet because we shift. We're like lava lamps. Depending of the temperature and where we're at, we mold into different kind of shapes. So I think that for the people that really want to play with that, try a few things and don't overthink it and don't overplan. Because if you start overthinking and overplanning, then you're not being creative. You're putting roadblocks before your creativity. So just like open mind, just go there and have fun and get lost. Like lose yourself in your space. And that's a great way to figure something out. So it's just little by little dropping kind of like little seeds among your journey of trying to find your creative state and then have a moment to reflect where and when and how quickly did you fall into it. And if you didn't, that's also something learned, then you can try something else. But little by little, at some point, you're going to figure it out. And when you figure it out, it's a great place to be. And I think that is definitely the competitive edge. Somebody that can get creative and knows the 1, 2, 3s and ABCs to get there quicker. If they're working for a company, you got to come up with a new idea, or whether you want to try to break a marathon, how can I get there quicker? Like those are some fun conversation with these individuals to figure out how and when did they come up with that idea.
Yeah, definitely. So it sounds like what I'm hearing is there needs to just be an element of exploration and inquisition and noticing maybe rather than forcing when you're feeling free, maybe from a cognitive space, that you're being imaginative, that you're being playful. And it sounds like being around people obviously is part of that, but people maybe that are aligned with your interests and values and passions and that you feed off that energy. It's infectious. Makes total sense. I've noticed also on my own when I go trail running and I almost lose a sense of consciousness. I have these thoughts just maybe that are in the background being unconsciously processed. And at times that's the most creative time of my day or weeks. Yeah, very much a learned experience, though I didn't necessarily from the off enjoy running or enjoy these other things. But as you say, if you can try different things, expose yourself to new environments, then you will start to understand that.
Yeah, the environment for me is a huge catalyst. And even when we do these camps or retreats or talks with people that are actually at the top of their game, we notice just by shifting the environment, if you take them someplace where they're not used and they're not mastered and they haven't routinely went through these steps, the outcome of the conversation and discussions are going to be completely different than if you do it within the environment that they've mastered, they know very well, like the back of their hands. So, and it doesn't have to be hard and expensive and hard to go through. Is just like have a conversation at the park, go walk on a beach, look for seashells, change your perspective, change your angle, and all of a sudden you'll realize, and the word you said there, exploration is huge. Just explore different things and get curious. And I think the people that push the limits and find new ways to do things are explorers and are also people that are very curious and want to figure out, why is this here? Oh, is it what does that have to do with me? Does it have to do anything with, and you find yourself into this conversation to yourself. And at some point, who knows, it could be after a shower, after a walk, after a run, after a sleep, you wake up and you're like, oh, there's just something different. And I think the secret here is able to capture when there's a little something different, when there's a different pulse that happens at a different time in a routine that you've established. I think using that as a marker, as a trigger, oh, there's something different. And then when the time comes, reflect, why did I start thinking that way? I think that gives you a little bit of I guess, innate ring and figure out, okay, for me, when I do this happen, it takes me a little bit. And then you can find your own rhythm. But again, then you have to redo that step, because if you find yourself always in that same rhythm and you're not being creative again, you mastered that, right? So it's a fun idea that you'll never get to it. There's never an end state. The finish line keeps moving. And I think that's the fun aspect of it, because as we live in a world now that everything is faster, you have more choices than ever to choose from. You have more options, more opportunities, and we all want to get there quicker, faster. And I think that's a fun aspect of it. But again, coming back to it, it's nice to be embedded in it, feel it, see it, smell it, taste it. But it's also good to retract yourself and figure out, where do I want to go? What am I good at? What am I missing? And then I think that comes to the conversation like, okay, what do you need as far as your surrounding, or additional insights or tools or people or frequency, in order for you to have the creative performance advantage of whatever you're trying to do, if you're trying to do that. If you're trying to be just a great human being and just curious and want to do, there's nothing wrong with that neither. I think that's a fun aspect of it, great stories. But regardless of who and where and when the outcome or the desired outcome is, if there is one, it comes back to the fun factor here, and where we all connect and inspire and tell and educate and inform is all done through stories. So we tend to forget that. It used to be back in the days, the ancient times, they used to go around the fire pit, and this is where celebrations were done and learnings for hunting and wars coming, or marriage or harvesting. And that was all done through stories. And we tend to forget these things nowadays, especially with all the platforms and the TikToks and the Snapchats. They're all great, but they're taking the focus away from just the human contact and sit down and listen to a story,
Yeah, for sure. You've spoken there about the difference in headspace by just altering the environment that individuals are in, rather than hosting it indoors within four walls and under artificial lights. If you hosted, say, I think I've heard you talk about boardroom meeting before, outside in a novel, exciting location, the difference that can make in regards to people's headspaces and their ability to be creative and almost think outside the box, so to speak. Off the back of that, is there any one or two things that you've seen have the biggest impact for teams and companies in regards to developing creative environments?
Yes. And I think there's some things that we're working with the San Antonio Spurs and RC Buford over there. They just built their new training facility in San Antonio, and we're working on the HPI working title Human Performance Institute there, which is sport is obviously one thing, but there's going to be a cognitive center working with the cyber crew and the Department of Defense there. There's going to be a whole medical center. There's going to be a technology center as well. So I think the future of high performance space are not going to be just one thing. I think we need to start meshing and notice the collaboration. We need to create a different intersection in order to have a different result where human meets technology. So human machine teaming. And what I've seen in some of these individuals or teams that were able to either push through when time is a bit tough or get to a solution quicker, faster. A lot of these leaders, whether it's a director or a team leader, always started with a story. It didn't start with, hey, we need to make more money. Yeah, we got that. So those individuals in a time of slumps or time of pinnacle success, it's been like, hey, we found ourselves here because of this. And if you personalize that, that has been a huge, huge factor of success in various fields as well. So I think that's one of the things that we try to really do at Liminal is when we do these talks or these presentations, we're really trying to embed the storytelling aspect of it on the front end, because we're all used to, you go to school and you see these talks and you sit down in a dark environment and the person comes on stage and he's really bright and, okay, here's what you're going to learn today. As human beings, that is not how you grab our attention. But when you start with the story or you start asking questions, hey, we're here today and we found ourselves on Mars, and all of a sudden you're like, hold on a second, this is using different language. And whatever needs to happen on the forefront, call it like a hook, like a pre-show to the show, you need to do that. You need to have either the word, the sound, or an anchor event or something. You need to have an activation where you reboot the people that are watching it. It's a quick turn off and turn on. If you're able to do that, then you're going to have the attention. You're going to have the right here, right now moment. And then you have a window to feed as much information or inspire or challenge whoever the group might be, because everybody responds differently. Some people need to be massage to it. Some people need to be challenged. Some people need to be talked this way. So as a leader in whatever environment that you're in, you need to spend a bit of time to understand who your people are and how to communicate with them and how the best way to get something out of it. If you figure that part out, then you're able to get into the productive aspect of it, or the creative space that you need to be with them, or the performance space that you need to be, whatever you need to be with them, you're able to get that. And that is done through great storytelling. And we're not all great storytellers, but we all have stories to tell. So just remember that. So next time I would just try to start with a fun story and to see where that conversation goes. And I bet you're going to have a different outcome than what you think that you're going to have.
Without a doubt. Yeah. And I love the quote. I think it's feelings, not facts, inspire action. And as you said, creating and engineering those emotive experiences, certainly in the business world, is something that I've found some of the best companies do. You look at Pixar, you look at Nike, you look at all of these companies who tell a story and move people. And like you say, obviously you need to firstly understand who your people are. And a big part of that is sharing stories. As you've said, creating those opportunities where, you know, you can sit around either the literal or metaphorical fire and just get to know each other. But ultimately, storytelling is something that, as I've gone through my career, I've lent on more and more, because I've just realized it's ultimately one of the most effective forms of communicating and understanding. So yeah, that makes total sense in regards to the work you've done there. And you mentioned also around the sort of AI tech collaboration. One question that I'd be interested to ask is, in your opinion, can AI provide us with the creativity we need to out-innovate the competition?
I think we're playing in that space as we speak now, and all these different chat GPTs coming out and platforms. I'm sure there's AI that's a way higher level and a lot more competencies behind black budget doors and all that stuff. So that, but from what I feel that we have access to now, I don't think AI is just there yet. I think we can use it. I think creative people can use AI to enhance or accelerate creativity. It gives them more ideas because it can generate. I use it a lot of time too, because sometimes it's hard for people to start on a blank canvas because you don't know where the angle, you don't know where the guide rails are, you don't know what it is. But if you can start using AI and just start spinning some ideas that you have, but you don't necessarily know how to put it together. Hey, it's this and that and that and this color and this environment. And then at least it can help spit you some starting point. And then from the starting point, being aware of your triggers, understanding your markers, going outside, putting yourself in creative environment, surround yourself with creative people, great conversation, great discussion, great stories, great music, great food. Then I think with AI, it can help almost jumpstart your idea or your concept. So that's how I see AI right now. Some people that maybe are in that space maybe have a completely different version of that, which I'd love to have if people do think that AI is more creative. And I think it could get there at some point. But AI, it just scatters all the lessons in the books and the interviews that it's all available to AI, and then just basically spits back to you what's closer to what you're demanding. So basically you're the chef and you say, I need this. And then it's going to go and shop all those best ingredients and bring it back to you. But as a chef, you still need to package it and put it together in the way that you envision it. What's your creative solution to this, right? So I think as it almost becomes that's the human and machine teaming. And that's a fun way right now with creative to say, how can we enhance? How can we accelerate? But it's not accelerate creativity. I think it's just how can you accelerate the idea that then you can take back and get creative in your own way of expressing your idea. So I think it gives you snapshots, so additional tools, but you still need to know how to master them and you still need to put them together. And I think that's where we're at. You put in the step, you put in your thoughts, you just sprinkle all your ideas that are very disjointed and might not touch each other and might be irrelevant. I think up to now, just this past year has definitely helped get you to a certain spot quicker than if you were not using machine.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a tool, they say, don't they, is only as good as the hands that yield it. And 100%. In this instance, the ability for AI to be creative is really only as good as the creativity we actually communicate to it with. And as you say, if we could develop that within ourselves, then we have a greater leverage upon a technology that can leverage that, if that makes sense. So that's really interesting. Thank you. Yeah. And you've spoken about the work you guys do around creating emotive experiences, and creativity obviously being something that you're looking to engineer there. And as an example, I've spent 6 months this year working with this really pioneering company called Deep, whose mission is, quote unquote, to make humans aquatic. with basically the goal of having them permanently living underwater by 2027. But in people who are really ambitious, what are the one or two mistakes you often see them making when they're trying to be more creative, let's say?
Well, first off, we'll do a shout out to Kirk. Kirk Crack is one of our performance advisors. So he's also working with Liminal, but also he's deep in the Deep Institute, and Dawn as well. She's working with them too. So it's great to see people from a community just really pushing the edge. And to your point, like, hey, we're going to establish this whole underwater environment. So just there by itself, the creative problem solving and thought and how to get there, I think that definitely merits something, because it's amazing to see if you surround yourself with the right brains and the right creative idea and the right people, how quickly you can make an impact. And that will most likely change how people view things and add so much more layers of scientific insights and learnings are going to come from there, and all that great stuff. So to your point, if there's a couple of mistakes that we see some people that are trying to get creative, and well, creativity, I don't think it can be contained. It can't be like, I want my wand, I want to be creative now. And that's what often they tend to do. Like I need something. The pressure definitely can do two things. I think pressure is a double-edged sword on this one. Because you can go day in and day out, week in, week out, month in, and just lose yourself, creatively think about this. And it could be this. At some point, you need to get specific and create a deadline, because you'll just spin off. So if you are in a business that you do need an outcome, you do need a result at some point, I think you do need to put a date on it. You should probably have some fudge factors though, because again, if you're really close and if you're there and if you just don't know that's what it is, well, you're going to be stuck with something that's could have gone the whole way, but at the same time you blocked it just before. So I think that's one of the mistakes that they do. You can know, and I get it, part of the leadership and CO, whatever. There's money constraint, there's time constraint, there's delivery. But if you're able to, in your process or however you design the scheduling or the journey that needs to happen, you should definitely give yourself a little bit of wiggle room near the end, where people often get there and it gets stuck. But if you're able to open up and say, oh, by the way, I'm giving you an extra 2 weeks, and you don't tell anybody, but all of a sudden, so it's not part of because if it's part of the schedule and people see it, we're all human. You're going to the last hour, you're going to start working on your exam, whatever it is, your essay. So I think that is one thing to take and consider as a leader, as CEO, whatever your role is. Give yourself a little fudge factor at the end, because if you got something good and then you get there and you push it and then you open and say, hey, there's a little breathing room here, but we need to get there. I think that's a great way to inspire the creatives and the people that are working day in, day out to it. Give them a little breath at the end. They catch their breath and they dive again. I think the result's going to be tenfold. So that's one aspect. And I think another little mistake that they're doing is, if you want to you have to spend more time with your group of people. So selecting an assessment of who you want, who you need takes a big play in there. It's not because you say you're creative that you're creative. And again, it's just understanding the outcome, the desired outcome, understanding your demographic, understanding your team. So a lot of people don't spend a lot of time with their teams. They read your resume, you're in, you make, a lot of money, and then all of a sudden you're the chief creative officer and you have to come up with all these creative ideas and all this stuff. And so there's sometimes in these big companies, these big corporations, where if you would invest more time into understanding who that individual you're hiring, and then give them a little bit of context and spending more human time, not boss to boss or whatever, or to employee, and spend that, you're going to find out a whole lot more as far as character, values, virtues, inspiration, when the best time to communicate with them. And all these, when pressure starts coming in, those factors, that collaboration, that connection you have at a human level will definitely help you on the long run. So I would say, don't completely create the creative aspect of it. Give yourself a little bit of fudge factor. And prior to this, knowing where you want to go, or have an idea what you want this outcome of this product or this service or this end to be, that then do your due diligence and figure out who you need in order to get there, because it might not be the same individuals packed in the same way that you've done in the past. You might need to switch a few people around. You might need to change the environment around. You might need to change your story around to maximize the outcome that you're looking for.
Interesting. Yeah, there's a few things that I took away there. One is to create the space to move between ideation and action, because as you said, if that deadline occurs, yet you're halfway through this ideation process, you've got to switch to action, and you're losing out on potentially that magic where we often, and this was my business partner that actually posted about this the other day, we get to 90% of a project and then it takes about the same amount of time again to do the last 10%. And so, as you say, if you can artificially create that deadline, create a constraint, which we know constraints already improve creativity. If you can create that and then allow for that fudge factor, as you say, from an ideation standpoint, makes total sense. And then, yeah, really interesting what you're saying there around one, understanding your people. It's a no-brainer to be able to know what can they bring that's different, how could it reframe our problem set, but also not being afraid to change things even from a structural organizational standpoint, depending on your new needs. That agility, I guess, that becomes harder and harder as organizations increase in size. Do you have a team that are able to be agile, that are able to adapt quickly? And obviously communication is a really big part of that, right? People feeling like they have the psychological safety to take risks. But one of the biggest challenges that I've observed within corporate teams is often a lack of willingness maybe to lean into risk. And I don't know if this is something you've experienced too, and maybe it has some links here with creativity, and that to be creative, you have to almost step outside of your comfort zone and question things maybe that you wouldn't normally question. In the work that you've done, is this something you consciously do? How do you change people's relationship with risk and discomfort in order to drive creativity?
I think if you just change your perspective a little bit, where assess versus assume, right? Assess the situation, assess where you're at, take a look, take the space you need versus assuming it's going to go a certain way. So I think that's one big aspect of finding how to get there quicker and with a more productive outcome. I would say I come back to like this selecting and assessment, and it's huge because like these big corporations, like the onboarding is so not individualized. You're like, you're a number, do this, you do this, and all of a sudden you're in, and then you're in and you don't know the people you're in. You're trying to catch a train and you have zero instruction of where you need to be, where you need to play, what's expected out of you beside the list that you saw what your description of a job title was. So I think there's a big opportunity there with these, just connecting people on human and meet them where they're at. And then spending a bit more time up front will save you a tremendous amount on the long run. So investing into the person or the group or the people that you might want to do up front. And yes, I'm sure there's constraints and there's investment that needs to happen there. But if you really pull back and you look of how much money and resources pushed at the end. I need it now. I need it twice as fast. Everything is expedited. Everything is more expensive. Everything, the expert that charges $1,000 a second needs to be there to figure something out. And I'm not saying it's never needed. Sometimes it's just a fact of the circumstance that's there. But it's like anything, like creativity. If you invest a little bit more upfront, why do I want to get creative? Where am I most creative? Who inspires me to get creative? Well, you start doing this, then eventually you don't have to think about when you get to the point, I need to get creative now because I'm stuck in a corner and I don't have a creative solution. So we tend ourselves to really see a little too far ahead, and then we forget of like what's in front of you. 1 step, 2 step, crawl, walk, run. We always want to run, whatever you want to run. But if you start doing your step, and I think by showing a bit of vulnerability up front, and as leaders, as coaches, as directors, empathize with your people. Again, it comes back to those things that we talked. If your story is up front and you spend a bit more time with your people at the beginning, you meet and you connect with them on a human level, not a boss to an employee or whatever, all those little simple earlier on step will have a huge return down the road. And if we're able to do this, and then all of a sudden, and then create this community, this culture of learn by your mistakes. Obviously, you want to mitigate the amount of risk that you're going to take, but you have to take risk. Unless you want to do the same thing over again and you're satisfied, that's where the box you want to stay. Great. Then I'd suggest just get a bunch of robots to do it instead, and they'll do it probably a lot better, a lot more efficient. And then you can get those people that were there do something else. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but this is a little bit of where I see some opportunities and some gaps where we need to reconnect on a human level first, inspire people, create a culture, creative thoughts, creative ideas, learning from mistakes, celebrating the highs and learnings from the lows as a group. I think that whether you're trying to put a show together or a product or a service, whether it's tech, business, entertainment, it doesn't matter. I think you're going to create a community at the end that will go to bat again when the next 80-hour week comes in. And if they feel they're engaged and they're part of this tribe that gives them the space, gives them guidance, gives them support, call it how it is, I think you're going to, then all of a sudden, then they become leaders as well. And then once you start building leaders within your organization that lead through stories, that lead through connection human, then you have a thriving business that you can go on. And it doesn't matter where that business decides to pivot or change, whether services to products. I think you're going to have the right crew and mates that are on that big ship with you and will make it work, whatever needs to happen.
Yeah, without a doubt. I often speak about connection and use analogy of the letter T, capital T, and how far the vertical line goes down. The roots is basically how strongly connected your people feel to that organization, and how wide the T is how connected they feel to their peers and each other. And you see so often, don't you, companies where, or even sports teams, where maybe a leader moves and his whole team move with him or her. And that ultimately is potentially because you've done the work to develop deep connections between yourselves. But as you said, have you brought them into the story of why they're there, what the mission is of the organization, that whole onboarding process to really delve those roots deep and to make sure that person has a deep connection to not just those around them, but the actual mission and the organization that they're now a part of. And I remember speaking to some of the All Blacks coaches and players about their onboarding process. And from my understanding, they will take each player individually up into sort of the headquarters when they come into the squad, and they'll walk them around their whole history, their heritage. And yeah, I'm sure you would have heard the phrase, and that you're basically just the current custodian of the shirt and leave it better than you found it. And that is something I think that's so often missed within a corporate space of connecting people vertically. They do the horizontal side of things pretty well. You'll go out and people will have drinks, they'll do team building activities. But at what point do you actually align someone's values with your mission and your organization and make them feel like they truly belong? And that's something that I think only the most exceptional businesses do and do well.
No, that's great. And you hit it right on the head there. It's just that we're human beings, and human beings, we all want to be part of something. We want to be engaged. We want to be part of the story. You know, we don't have to be on the front end or the star or the A-lister of the story, but we all like to be part of the story, because no matter how good or bad the day goes, you're going to go back home and either with friends or kids or family, at some point, the conversation, hey, what are you doing? What are you working on? And if, I'm doing this. And good stories and just telling stories are infectious, because then how often do you go to a bar and say, oh yeah, I did this, and next thing your buddy or your friend's going to be, oh, I did this. And the next thing people are talking on top of each other, because what is that? It's all infectious. People want to have to say something, what they did or what they learned or what they didn't know. That's just a human being. So allowing space to do that within your work environment or your teams or whatever, I think it's essential. It's because also there's a sense of intensity. It's impossible to keep that intensity that long. So it's like a pulse. So sometimes that person's going to lead it, and then next thing it's you. And being aware of this, you're going to figure out in your organization and your team, like almost the frequency. You're going to see all those spike marks and those triggers. And once you figure that, it tells you a lot. If you, as a coach, or if you're a director or something, you need to lead back, just by listening to your stuff, it's going to tell you what's missing or if you're humming. If you're humming and you're like, we're in good space right now, that's when team wins. That's what people achieve everything. And when things start to go not as good as the intent was, I think if people start to step back and start looking at the teams or the individuals within the team, who do I have, or the teams within the organization, what's working, what's not working, it's going to tell you a lot. So it comes back to the sense of awareness of space, awareness of performance, awareness of where there's gaps and opportunities. And then just figuring out either to be humble enough to say, hey, I don't know what I'm missing here. I need somebody to come and help. And whoever, and most of the time that people, those leaders that lift their hand and says, listen, I'm completely lost here, I need some help, they're able to get back on the track a lot faster than the person that said, no, this is how I do it. And then the grinding, I think we all need to grind to a certain degree, because you can't just start, jumping ship every time there's a first little hiccup, because if not, we're going to be swimming a lot. But there's a sense of like, when things get tough and you're grinding through, you have to be able to pause, pull back. Where am I at? Okay, I still need to push. I still feel good. You need to almost retract yourself from yourself and then dive back in. And the more you do this, then it allows you to get a better view of the landscape and the map that you're going through, right? So I think that's really interesting of what you're saying, because it resonates regardless of whatever landscape you're in and an environment that you're in. It all pretty much comes back to these foundations of what makes us human. And what, to your point, to re-add to, I think where companies and where there's a good opportunity to improve on is establishing company values and ethos and vision, and sharing that with people when coming in. And if they don't capture these values, unfortunately, you can't work with us. And if you start doing this, then all of a sudden the people that are embedding and embedding those values and putting the work and are in there uplifting and obtaining those, the mission, the vision, that ethos. And then once you start saying no to people because they don't fit in, it gives that think of like, okay, we got something special here. And when they have something special, you dig deep, you dig your toes a little bit more, and you're like, I'm grounded in here. I feel it. This is my family. This is my tribe. I'll go to bat for them. I'll do whatever. So I think reestablishing that and resurfing those values, vision, mission, and ethos as a company upfront, part of the onboarding, will also give you the leverage down the road to say, hey, remember those 3 things, those 5 things that, you sign your name on that says, right now you're missing 3. So we need to figure that out. So it gives you that, because if you reinforce it at the front and you tell the story and then you go down that hole as far as why is it important and what is it going to do different, and then it like gives you that right to do that. But if you don't do that up front and all of a sudden you start throwing the book at whoever, down the road, then it becomes very messy. Then it becomes like, oh, well, I'm not sure. So I think there's definitely a good opportunity there for these big companies, these corporate companies, to do that, where you cannot change you can't make it, that big boat, tanker, oiler, you can't make it do a 90-degree turn, like this. But I think if you invest a little bit more upfront and you stay true to certain things and you hold people accountable and you create the environment that they might need to thrive, again, doesn't matter what you're selling, it's gonna pay back.
Without a doubt, yeah. I loved your quote with Liminal, which is better at you, better at what you do. To understand yourself and be better at you, you've spoken about the power of self-reflection. But what mistakes do you often see people make in this space? And what are they missing out on by maybe not reflecting in regards to values, identity, etc.?
Well, I think a lot, again, it's not mistakes, because we all do it. It's just part of the process. I think we tend sometime I think we all get inspired by other people, where all of a sudden we have this like an imposter syndrome, where we try to be with somebody else. Oh, like Andy is so great at this. His values are this. Mine should be like that, right? So I think that's one of the approach that I think often a trend that you see. You're trying to be somebody that you're not, which is fine, because you got the inspiration done. You have this ideation of like, oh, this is what I'm looking up to because I really see this. So it helps you narrow definitely some of your values and vision that you might have for yourself. So I would just say, one is, once you start looking at all these people and certain things that you naturally gravitate to or ground yourself into, whether it's your background or your upbringing, compassion, respect, empathy, all these things, I think just don't try to put yourself too many layers. Start with the ones that you are embodying and you're like, yeah, that's easy. That's another little mistake. You put yourself so many and all of a sudden you find yourself trying to be something you're not, that doesn't come naturally, but not saying that it won't come, but maybe you're not just ready yet. You put your hands in the cookie jar, try to take too many things out, right? So I would say that's one, I think, of something to maybe consider and think. Start with one. Once one is good and you check it and you check all the box, two. So then that way it becomes authentic, right? Authenticity is huge. You can get inspired by other people and you can probably embody some of the other people's trait and behaviors and stuff to either help you get someplace or accelerate a buy-in or whatever. That's great. But you should be humble enough to realize and understand who you are first, what's really important to you. And at least it gives you a starting point. You can add values, you can add certain things later on as you grow, because going from teenagers and performers, and then you go through adolescence, and then you go through in your 20s, you got money, your egos, and then you got kids later on. So there's different times in your life where you transform, you change into something else, right? You morph. And that's okay. And I think you need to be alert and aware that you will change physically, mentally, spiritually. But as long as you keep the foundation close of what is my meaning, what's my purpose, keep it simple, keep it real, keep it true. I think that's probably the best way to keep it steady and consistent. And whatever you're telling, the story you're telling, people will see that you're true. And then once you're authentic, it's a lot easier to get the buy, no matter what you're trying to do, whether you're trying to do a pitch or sell a team or whatever. I think great people see through the bullshit real quick. So that's important. And be yourself first. Understand. Start small and then build a nice, strong foundation that you can build your house off versus putting a house of cards.
That makes total sense. And you've spoken there about identity, but in order to sort of create this roadmap of your values and your identity as it's evolved, and ultimately, who are you? Who were you? Who would you like to be? How do you personally approach achieving that level of self-reflection so you can create that clarity around that, either individually or with teams that you work with in this space?
I think a good exercise to do that is whoever we're working with or I'm working with is you just again, going back to the environment, find an environment where he or she or they are comfortable and they're in the right mindset. And then it's just pull the handbrake, take a pause. And then from this day backwards, connect some of the dots that made them who they are. And then you can go through this exercise going from your childhood, what's some things that made you and basically do your own exercise, connect your own dots and that got you here. And then you get them to open up and they start talking. And once you start talking, I guarantee you 100% of the time people, oh, it's true. I forgot about this. And then all these kind of hidden things that were under a pile of books or suppressed under some emotions back then, but now you're able to talk about them. All the things come up. And then you don't have to do much. You just basically open the door. They tell their story. You connect the dots. They're here. And then it gives you a roadmap of a little bit more of who they are. And then from there, it's like, okay, reflecting from this, give me two things that really got you here that you see consistency throughout. Hard worker? Are you really lucky? Are you a gambler? Are you a risk taker? Whatever it is. And they feed this stuff, right? And then at some point, all you're doing is opening the door and they're walking through it. And once they're here now, then you can start self-reflecting. Okay, knowing and reflecting on your roadmap up to today, going forward, is it the same values and vision and mission that you want to pursue, or do they shift? Do they tweak? And all of a sudden, they'll do their own work. They'll do their own assessment. It's just, unfortunately, we live in a world that often we're waiting for other people to do our assessment. just do it yourself once in a while. Hey, you're going to save some time at the doctor's office, and it's fun to do. And then I always say, don't take yourself too seriously. Just be in the moment, capture some main pulses that happened up to now, reflect where you're at. Are you happy with where you're at? Or you're not? If you're not, why aren't you happy? Then you can go down that hole. Okay, why aren't you happy? What would you have to change? And you go through just step by step and unpacking all the baggage and stories that happened up to now will give you a pretty good idea of where they're at and what needs to happen or what needs to shift or pivot or continue depending on, how happy they are physically, mentally, spiritually, business, at home. So it's again, it's not rocket science. It's just spending the time with people and connecting them and allowing them a platform where they feel safe, they feel ready to open, and then they just share. And you just okay, bit of this, explain a bit of that, and then that's they're gonna go back home and like, oh my God, this is the best session ever. And all they have to do, they talk to themselves about themselves.
Yeah, having done this several times myself, most recently having set up the company at the beginning of the year, it was a hugely reflective period around who am I, what has my journey been up to this point, and in line with my values, what is the mission from here. And it was pretty clear, but there was, again, every time you do it, more insights, more understanding of yourself. And I'm someone I think that's naturally quite self-reflective because I tend to be a bit of an overanalyzer, a bit of an overthinker. And I personally know that if I can understand myself better, then I can almost create conditions to maximize strengths maybe and minimize weaknesses. But in regards to the impact this can have on a team, how can understanding yourself better result in your team performing at a higher level collectively?
Well, if you know yourself better, then you understand your triggers, your behaviors, your mood, your state of mind, where you're at. So I think if everybody within the team knows themselves and are able, and you've built a culture of being open and share and talk to one another, not just when you're at work, but outside of work as well. I think you're going to gravitate to more productive moments than not, because you know where and when to call Jack or Jane. Hey, like I had an idea. Okay, well, don't call Jack at 6 a.m. before he had his coffee, because you're going to have that same conversation 2 hours later. So like, it's all these little, you might not think of them as, oh, that's irrelevant. It's going to take 2 seconds. But the one thing we don't have that we cannot gain is time. Now, if you're able to maximize the conversations and being real quality versus quantity, then instead of having that conversation twice or 3 times or the wrong timing, you have it at the right moment, then you can focus on everything else that you need to do before that, during, or after, right? You're not wasting your time and you're not going back to like a reset, because that's one thing I find for myself whether I'm trying to write something or create something, an idea or concept, it comes when it comes. And when I need to, I'll put myself outdoors, go for a walk. But sometimes it comes like in fucking just before dinner, cooking, and the smells are there, the music is there, the kids there, the synergy. All of a sudden, I'm like, fuck, I gotta go right, and I'll go right. And then my wife like, oh, here you go working again. I'm like, sorry, I'm in the mood. So just like understanding when you're in the moment sometimes, and I think you need to embrace that thing, because if you want to, you can stop it. But if you keep stopping when ideas coming to you, you're not practicing this idea if you really want to become creative. But I just think when ideas and thoughts and moments come, capitalize on it. And so I think being aware of connecting these things and taking these little moments or hints, if you want to, like, I think the quality of your work will see it through. And I'm a big believer of quality versus quantity. I know there's certain things you need to do. You need to get X amount of reps, that we get that. But for certain things that you cannot quantify, or metrics, where it's like creativity, creative process, ideas, imagination, spark, we haven't figured out how to control those things. So when they do come, embrace it, take it all the way. And then what it does is, here we are talking, I'm talking to you, I'm telling you about a story about me getting my ideas, and vice versa. And whatever this conversation is going to go, hopefully somebody's going to listen to, like, oh man, I get my ideas too. And maybe I should put a little journal on my night table, because often I'll wake up in the middle of the night and have this idea, but by the time I get up and I go, then I'm lost my train of thoughts and it's not as potent as it was. So these little habits can definitely help you get to where you need to be quicker and capitalize on those little magic moments that naturally happen. It happened to all of us. You just need to capture them and take advantage of them.
Nice. And from what it sounds like, as you've said in regards to the team's side of things, if you can understand yourself better, you can communicate that, and then others can understand you far better too. And you can support each other with the right conditions, and maybe the empathy that's needed of them within teams, especially when there's pressure and time constraint. And just that level of understanding within a team is really crucial, isn't it? And if you think, I guess, of any teams where you felt extremely excited to be a part of and felt like you belonged, I can guarantee you understood those people and they understood you on a deeper level than just a colleague.
100%. And you just by saying that, you guys taking the time to understand each other a little bit more, just it's catalyzed conversation. We have the same thing at Liminal. We call it IOS, so internal operation system. So it's called MyOS. And we have a tool at some point we can share with you guys if you're interested. And what it does is just ask you a series of questions, and then you have to share with your team. So there's a moment of reflection, and you need to take this, you go through, and just by reading it through, you're like, oh, when is the best time to call me? And then you get through these things that we take in consideration. But when you join a team, you might miss that conversation, and all of a sudden it's all these people, this perception. You fall into a perception state. Oh, well, I thought that you love to work out. I thought that you're always the first person I call in the morning, because in my mind, working out, going for a run early in the morning, I figured you'd be in the right mindset. No, my mindset in the morning is I want to just run, not think about anything. And when I come back after a shower and coffee, then I'm really, oh, cool, perfect. Like, it's all these things that we take in consideration. We don't take in consideration. It's the micro expressions, the micro timing. It's the connection time with the people. So that is great, because if you see it in some of the most performance team, like, and Jürgen Heitmann can definitely speak more of it, obviously in the special operation forces, says once you go through all these reps and you go through thick and thin with these guys that are backing you and you're trusting them with your lives, when you're on a mission and you're on a thing, and all of a sudden just one look, you'll know exactly, okay, he's going to go this way, and that's what he's thinking, and all it took. So that takes time. But again, you come back to the simple aspect of it. Spend some time with the people before you hire them and talk to them on a human level. You start doing these things, it's going to pay out. It might not get to that level because that's an extreme case, which they do need to get to that. But let's say even if you get 25% of that in the corporate world, next thing you're in a big high stress friggin' pitch, and you develop, you have to, deliver this, and everybody's on the synergy. You just look at each other and be like, okay, cool. No, you got this. Perfect. Okay, great. Like, that has a huge upsell, and it's a huge tool to have it, but you need to invest earlier on. You can't decide to start investing that when the pressure cooker's on and you have to do that. No, it's like, when do you throw the Hail Mary, that you do, like your team, you're like, okay, I've so-and-so, I know they're going to be there, and I'm seeing them going, it's going that way. You obviously you take a risk, but you have this sense of synergy in the group that live, breathe, smells, moves together. And I think that's a huge advantage to have in the performance states, wherever you are, whatever your landscape is.
Yeah, that level of understanding and empathy is really crucial, isn't it? Pivoting maybe slightly from teams, almost zooming out a little bit more to organizationally, something that I've been brought in previously to help facilitate is culture change. And I tend to try and simplify that as largely just behavior change at scale. But a behavior is obviously underpinned by habits by values by identity, and then identity is underpinned, as we've spoken about, by the stories and narrative we tell ourselves, or even those we've been told by others. You've spoken about how you had to transform your identity. Maybe it wasn't a conscious thing, but it could have been, from athlete to artist to coach. How can those listening continually evolve their identity to ensure they're not living out someone else's story of them, or a past, maybe limited version of themselves?
No, that's a great question. And I think we all go through stages of transformation. And I think some of us that are a little bit more aware or alert of our mindset, our own performance, as well as some key things that allows us to perform at our optimal presence. So what are some basic things? Sleep. Am I sleeping good? Am I eating good? Is my personal life good? Like, if you start by almost like this thing where the simple basic facts that allow us to perform or just to be ourselves, if you start that, and then just keep in check with you. What's good? I would just say, don't go too long without checking in with yourself, because then all of a sudden you find yourself on a precipice and there's way too many things to fix. And that's when burnout happens. And then you're not being productive, you become counterproductive, and then you find yourself in a hole where it's really hard to get back in. And unless you're supported by the right environment or people or crew that are able to get the helicopter, bring you up, and then be like, all right, we're back here. Here's your 1, 2, 3s. You're back on track. And that's one of the things that I feel a lot of people are missing is like, we're lucky. I'm lucky within my people, the Andes and the Jurgen Liminal crew and the community of entertainers and performers and athletes and artists in Vegas. Like, we all support each other. We're all there for one another because we all went through pretty much through war together. We went through like the good times, the bad times, the performance. You got to do that. So I would just say, check in with you sooner than later. Find some people that, you inspire and they inspire you. So this commonality of like bonding with certain people, because that we all need some support at some point. You need to either talk some ideas through, vent, celebrate, ask, all the basic human factors that we need to do that makes us without even a business hat on. So I would say, hey, check in with yourself, be real. Don't try to pretend to be more. Because if you're trying to pretend, then that'll take you off course because you're going to pretend to be somebody else, something else. And then you end up having this imposter syndrome or avatar that is not even you. And we're seeing it more and more nowadays, especially with social media and all this stuff. These people taking all these pictures, these filters that are put on and stuff. And you're like, oh my God, not even you. So be real. Check in with yourself, ask for help, and don't try to be a hero. Don't try to take too much on because we tend to, that's another thing too, as parents and business. I can do it. I can keep pushing. At some point, your backpack becomes super heavy where you're not doing yourself any favors and you're not doing your team any favors because you're not productive. You're basically just stuck in the hill and you're not moving, and everybody behind you is trying to get past you and you won't let them because you're like, no, this is my thing, I got to do it. So at some point I think it's good to delegate a few things. But again, if you create a culture of sharing, communicating, understanding, telling stories, trusting one another, if you do all this stuff, it's all going to come naturally at some point. We by trade, we just want to take, it's a challenge. We get it. You get it. It's like, I'll try to take a little bit more. And it's good to do that. It's good because we test our limits. We don't know what we don't know. And I think as human beings, we're always trying to push that edge a little bit more, but you can't do that alone too long. At some point, you're going to need somebody that checks in with you and say, hey, hold on a second. Let me take you this. And here's why we can do it. And then all you have to do is it just gives you these little brushes right, left, and gets you to shift. If this is going a little bit too hard, you don't need to do 180. You can just shift a little bit more, go this way. Oh, I feel better now. Okay, I'll go back on my track. And I would just say be okay with stepping outside your path or outside your comfort zone little by little, because you will realize that it's not so scary and you will start building comfort in uncomfortable situations. And you don't want to go jump off the cliff too fast. But I think if you're aware of it and if you're willing to take a little risk, and I don't feel too comfortable being on stage, but I'll try to do that. Oh my God, it wasn't so scary. So what did I learn from this? Well, I can definitely talk in front of a group of people if I'm able to do that. Check. Perfect. I'll keep going on your path. Oh, like, I'm not feeling too good, but I've been hearing that these cold plunges are good. Well, I hate water. I'm not like, I'll just do one little cold plunge. I'll do that 3 times, 10 minutes a week. Oh my God, I sleep better. I feel so much better. Okay, no, go back on track. It's all these things. It's all out there. Tools, resources, support, people, groups. They're all out there. I think we just need to put our ego aside a little bit and be hungry and be okay with exploring outside our comfort and outside what we're really good at, because that is going to give us our tool and that's going to keep us the edge as we live in a world where things move so fast and expectation is so high. That's the only way to stay alive, is you need to fill in your backpack with additional tools, whether you're an expert on it or not, but just having it and knowing and talking to people when's the right time to use your knife and when's the right time to use your spoon and when's the right time to use your nail. All these little things help you on your journey where you keep evolving and changing it up in the same time of being a healthy individual. Because if you're not healthy and if you're not well at the beginning, doesn't matter what you're trying to do. So you got to make sure that cell is good and then push forward, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense. So it sounds like having just the foundation of health and well-being, and then on top of that, making sure you're regularly checking in and reflecting on whether, and I use a values audit with teams that I've worked with before, whether the values are still aligned with their behaviors, or whether, because we're all social beings and we all adapt our behaviors depending on the environment we're in, whether we've drifted away from what's actually important to us and who we are. And then also surrounding yourself, like you say, with people who can create that psychological safety to delve into this. and maybe sometimes to provide some accountability or to communicate authentically around it, but also to do this as an exercise together and to delve into it and to ask probing questions. And then also, like you say, to be able to step out of your comfort zone, try new things, seek new experiences, and you might find out something about yourself which you didn't realize. And that's going to just naturally evolve over time, as opposed to staying within these walls that we might create based off the narrative that we've told ourselves or others have told us.
Yeah, because being comfortable does not equal innovation. When you're comfortable, you're in your space, you're chilling, you're relaxing, everything is good. And that might be fine. But then if you really want to change, or you want to change your path or pivot or do something new, do something fresh, at some point you're going to have to feel a little bit uncomfortable. This is not the environment I'm used to. And then you find yourself in that explorer's mindset. And again, I think being okay to take like step by step. You don't need to jump off the helo if you're scared of heights. You can walk yourself to the edge, and then walk yourself to the balcony, and and eventually you're making your way up to a plane, and eventually you do this. But just know that there are steps out there. There's people that are experts in that field that can tell their stories, that it can inspire you, comfort you in a certain way, and make you realize that, hey, it's not as far reach as possible. I can do that. So, and again, when you open yourself to other people, stories come in line, challenges, inspiring, and then it finds you in a complete different format, different mindset that you're receiving. And then once you've done your receiving point, when you had enough, or you come back, you settle that in, and all of a sudden adapt all your tool set, adapt your behaviors, change or modify whatever you need to do in order to take in this new environment or this new tool or insight that you just learned. And that becomes a version 3.0 of you, or 4.0, whatever it might be. You keep evolving your versions of yourself. But no matter how complex the issue might be or the challenge ahead, we're all speaking the same thing. It comes back to self-awareness, understanding your environment, your triggers, your behaviors, support mechanism, health, wellness. We can talk about all these things, and it just rechecks with you. And those are the roots, the bottom of the T. Those are your roots that anchor you in and gives you the strength that no matter how big the hurricane is or the wind, your T is going to stay there. And at some point it restables itself, and then you're right there again, and you can push it through. So that's the fascinating thing, where it doesn't matter where it is. And then whether it's in the creative arts, or whether it's in business or the military or medicine, those are the key factors that you need to nurture and that you need to keep aware of it. Because if you lose track of these things, and it doesn't matter how big that you can do, at some point the storm is going to hit, and you're going to have no grounds, and you're going to fall flat on your back, and then the restart is a whole process to get that again. It's possible to do that. It takes more time and more energy, and as we get a little bit older in our life, we want to try to spend as less energy as possible with the maximum return. So I would just say, if you got something good, stick to it. Or maybe we all need to go a little refresher class of like, oh, this is what's important to me: values, awareness, health, wellness, sleep. Once I do these things and I master this, then I can do whatever I want on top. So that's a fun factor of it, of whoever we do talk to, no matter where you're at, you bring it right back to this, and it's like, oh, that's true. And to the point, coming back to our topic of creativity, now that you've re-seen yourself, or you have a different version of yourself, and you're reanalyzing those key factors for you as a human first, sprinkle in a bit of creativity on top of that. How creative can you get? Okay, now I want to see things different. Oh, I want to dress this way. Oh, I could do that. Or I could change this. Or I want to talk to that person. Oh, I'm curious into that. That's interesting. And then it just creates this momentum. And once you have a momentum, and if you're surrounded by the right people, and you're healthy, and you're sleeping well, sky's the limit.
Yeah, there may be some people that are already itching to go and do something creative, or to do a values audit. For those people, we do live in a pretty complex modern day society. Throughout human history, we've, for the vast majority, lived in societies and tribes where we've undergone clear rites of passage, pivotal moments where we move from being one identity, such as a child, let's say, to another identity, such as a parent, or an adult even, or a partner. But one thing that seems to be different in our modern complex society is a significantly greater number of identities we can embody at any one time. Like I, for example, I'm a son, a brother, a friend, and a partner, but also a business partner, an extremely average athlete, a keen meditator, a 3-star chef, a dog lover. The list goes on. What do you think are the costs of this complexity, and how can we understand our core identity despite how many elements there are to us? Or is it just that we need to embrace that diversity of who we are?
Yeah, I think embracing it's a good way to looking at it because we all shift every day, every minute, every week, depending where we're at, who we're at. Everything shifts a little bit. But you know what? Like we've had those different identities for like millions of years. You were a hunter, a man, a gatherer, a thinker, whatever it might have been back then. But to your point now, because of all the platforms and the society and the culture we live in, we have access to at least label ourselves in so many different ways. Now, if it's important to you to label yourself as something, great, that's fine. Then that gives you, one story arc to tell about, hey, what's the story of Ben the father and Ben the acrobat and Ben the dog lover? Like there's some similarities, but what are the three ingredients that make that person or that value of that identity? I think it's fun. It allows and enables people to decide where and how they feel more comfortable explaining who they are depending on who they're talking to. So that's also interesting. That's also fun. And some of those identities I think fall closer to home than others. I think some of them can definitely be a stretch and you're like, oh, my identity as a business guy, I could do this. Is your bravado coming in and you're trying to become a little bit something for just your self-satisfaction or your need to buff up and to flex a little bit? Great, that's fine. But I'm not sure if I'm answering your question because it's hard to say. We have access to all these things that we can decide to label ourselves. What's the most important thing right now to you? I would say anchor that. What is your meaning and purpose? And maybe all those different identities, you'll probably shift a few identities if, if you want to be just more entertainment. I just feel like being good today. Well, I'm going to be Ben the dog lover and likes to go on a nice hike at Red Rock because that's the mood I'm get to be. But again, by doing that, by putting myself, dropping my body, my spirit, my soul into that environment, it'll most likely start catalyzing some different ideas and stimulate creativity. And then that person, then that identity might come back with added layers because I got creative and I was in that space. And all of a sudden, I'm Ben the thinker that I like all those different colors on these rocks, and I'm going to do these new totems and share that with the world because that's what my new vision is. So I would just say, I think it's good to have all these different identities. It creates diversity, it creates stories, it creates conversations, discussion with whoever we are. But you should probably focusing on which one means the most to you and then stick with those for a little bit and see how far you can develop that identity and to see how that impacts your personal life, your business life, and the people around you. And if there's a good impact on that, a positive outcome, whether you inspire other people or you're there for other people, and then they see that and you create that, I think the more the merrier that you're able to do this. So as long as the intent is positive growth or outcome, I'd say be whatever you want to be. Just embody it, embrace it, and sing it nice and loud.
Awesome. It's a good message, definitely. I'm not sure if you've come across Owen Eastwood before. So he's a performance coach who grew up in the New Zealand town that I lived and worked in for 3 years. And he speaks within his work. He's written a book called Belonging, which is brilliant and really taps into some of these core themes around identity and storytelling that we've spoken about with his Maori ancestry. But he speaks about asking one of the great All Blacks of his time, I think it was Jerome Kano, what his individual purpose was. And the fact that Jerome didn't actually understand the question, and instead he spoke about how he's nothing on his own and only something as part of his family, community and team. And personally, having worked across a wide variety of cultures, including traditional Western environments in the Northern Hemisphere, and then dipping into Maori Polynesian values in New Zealand when I lived over there, I found this really fascinating. And I'd be interested to hear your take on whether you think it's important to base your identity on you as an individual or as a member of something bigger than you, or both for a high-performing team and the people within it.
I think it's important. But again, the clearer the message and the vision and the values are established up front, I think the clearer that question can be answered. So depending on what your team, because if not, then it's left to personal interpretation and individualized. And then on a team, somebody might be, hey, I'm here because I need to win. And on the same team, the other person can be like, I'm here because I want to support my crew to do as best as possible. Now, those are two different approaches, two different styles. So I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think that conversation needs to happen. And I think that's whether it's an individual or a coach or a director or a founder, whoever that might be. I think that conversation needs to happen. The sooner that you have that conversation, I think the sooner you have alignment. On teams, you can, and I think there's two ways, and none of them are bad. You can either align team vision and values first, where we established a big goal as a group, as a unified front. And then you can unpack, all right, Bob, what is your intent and your vision and mission and values as a teammate? And then you can basically you unpeel the onion after that. And it becomes like, hey, for me, I'm here because I want to make sure, if we're playing American football, like, hey, I need to block as many people to make sure my quarterback does that. Okay, cool. Now take that a deep like, okay, so what are you going to do? Well, I'm here to be as healthy as possible to make sure that I'm as strong as possible so I can stop that. Okay, take that another level. Okay, I need to make sure that I eat and I sleep well so I'm really here to perform at my best. So if you start unpeeling the onion that way, that's a fun conversation. You can have it this way, or you can flip the script and then have it, okay, I think you need a lot of people, you need to drive that conversation, at least instigate and push a little bit. No, give me a bit more. And then at some point, then it becomes a habit. And these people, these performers or whoever they might be in whichever field, then they'll start to take that upon themselves to say, okay, what is my meaning and purpose today? And then they can expand and compress however it might be as an individual right here, right now for my family, but how I meant as a male in my community. How am I into my team and organization? And what is my bigger vision and purpose to make this world a better place? What am I going to play, and what can I control in my environment in order to optimize that vision and mission? So I think if you start on the team first, it's a lot easier because like you have your vision, your mission, like what are we going to do? Because that's what a lot of these performance teams do. You come in on a team, even if you're a 100-meter sprinter, you still have a team around it. Yes, you're the one running it, but you still need strength and conditioning. You still need physiotherapists. You need your coach. You need your athletic wear. You need everything, right? So in order to accelerate the bind, depending on the environment and desired outcome or space that I'm in, I would probably start with a team first and like that, get everybody humming and singing, and whether it's all black and it's like did this. And then afterwards, once you got that buy-in, if they are not used to having that reflection about this, then you can use that as a benchmark. No, this is your team. Now take it one step. Who are you inside that team? Who are you inside that man? Who are you inside that locker room? Who are you at home? Then you can, and then afterwards, at some point, when you do have that conversation, then you'll establish a culture of sharing and opening up and storytelling and educating people. And then with your entire team knows who they are as individuals at home and all the way up to who they are as a team on the front, then that team is performing at a higher state because they're aware of each other and themselves on the same thing, where when things come to shove, when push comes to shove, they will naturally, get together and do whatever they needs to do because they already had that conversation pre, post, during. And Jack might know that Bob is having some hard time at home, so he's there and he's gonna push a little bit more because he knows that. So all those things I think come into play, and obviously those references are all in sports, and it's the same thing in the business world. You can do the same stuff, just the goal or the outcome is a little bit different. The landscape is a bit different, but if you're able to tap into this, I think you will uplift performance and optimization within the organization, no matter where you're at.
I'd love to finish on a question that almost links back to probably one of the first things that we spoke about today. The evolutionary need for human connection, right, has just become even more apparent through COVID in the last few years. And I think we both share an interest in understanding, like you've said, ancient human wisdom, and how for the vast majority of history, we've connected through sharing stories, food and music and dance and laughter. And if anyone listening is interested too, then Robin Dunbar I've personally found some fascinating talks which explains like the origins of each of these as we evolved, and laughter, for example, appearing 2 million years ago within our ancestors. But with economic instability and things like competition for talent at the moment at an all-time high, and then also throwing into the mix hybrid or remote working, which is probably here to stay, what single piece of advice would you give to people in order to create a deep level of connection and meaning within their teams or organization?
I think that's a tough one because we all come from different backgrounds. We're completely to your point. We're remote, different places. So I would just say make the time to meet in person because it is so valuable just to meet in person. That human connection you can't really replicate on this. This is great. This works. We get the conversation. We check the box. We're going through some conversation. I think that is great. But I would just say make the time. A lot of people do not make the time. I say make the time to actually do it in person. Spend resources to do this because it's going to pay out, and be okay to put your agenda on hold to spend some time and get to know each other on a human level. And it doesn't have to be done all in one day. You don't have to put pause at work and go a month on a beach with your crew, which although that would be awesome. But I think just implementing those little time in and checking in with yourself and with others on a regular basis where it's done on an authentic level, that it's not forced and stuff, I think that you're going to have a huge return. And you're going to discover things about yourself. You're going to discover things about your teammates, your partners, and little by little, you will be able to understand how he or she or they, where to get them, where to meet them in order to optimize whatever needs to happen. So agenda aside, spend some quality time with that person and just shoot the shit. Talk, how you feeling? How you doing? And it doesn't have to be on a metrics, and it doesn't have to be like, hey, tell me on a 1 to 10, how do you feel? That's great. That can work because maybe that gets the conversation going, but just having these authentic conversation where you meet them and just talk about the day, how they're feeling, is there anything you can do? We all want to be engaged. We all want to feel supported. So find that right balance where whatever that conversation needs to be, because if somebody does feel part of a team, part of a tribe, and knows that he or she or they are supported and are seen for who they are as an individual first, and what they have to offer, it's crucial and it's great and it's well and it's going to help the team do better. If you just get those three things going, you're going to up level your performance and your people within your organization and your surrounding, because God knows that at some point we all need to feel love. We all need to feel supported. We all need to feel celebrated. We all need to feel that we're learning something and we're being challenged. And the only way to truly get to that is spending time human to human outside in a space where the agenda and outcome is on the side and you're just in the present with that person discussing stuff.
Yeah. And I don't think I realized until I started working with companies the opportunities myself and the team had for that within elite sport, and when I worked with special forces, just through the time that you spent together, dead time, let's say, between stuff. Those conversations actually were probably the most valuable out of any for creating that level of connection. And so exactly what you've said there, you have to be consciously engineering it in the corporate space, because you don't naturally have the same amount of time and you have to put it further up the priorities. You can't just expect it to happen. You have to make it happen.
And the pressure is so there. And like, even that's what we see like in Liminal, like I think there's a huge opportunity in the entrepreneur and founder space because they are under stress. The pressure is there, that not enough time in a day to get everything done. And a lot of these leaders and CEOs and COOs and CFOs, and they're not given the right tools and resources to really drive the team or themselves. And you take on, and what we were talking about before, like, hey, you keep putting on your backpack, and at some point it's counterproductive and you find yourself lost. There are a lot of them at that level, they're alienated by themselves. So there are not too many people they can talk to. So I think there's a huge opportunity that we want to really dive into and help and bring some of these key foundations back to life. They all know, they're all super intelligent and super performant individuals that got there, but somehow through through the steps and the years, I think a little bit of dust fell on those things. Who am I as a person? What's my meaning and purpose? If I want to perform best, I should probably sleep. If I can't sleep 8 hours, what is the best other regeneration way that I can get to my optimist state? So there's a lot of fun things we're playing with. So I would just say down the road, if ever there's certain people or that are intrigued on how they want to optimize themselves, or at least have that conversation to say, hey, like I'm stuck here. I'm here. Like, how can I get better? Is there a way to get better? And would definitely want to work with them and bring AI and bring the data science to it and bypass and accelerate through the noise, because there's a lot of data out there. There's a lot of trends, depending who your sponsor are and like this. So we're trying to streamline the conversation where we can give insights and knowledge and tools to these high performance individuals that as soon as they feel better, it will basically, gravitate through the organization, where if my leader's got a great story, I see him or she or they working it, they're inspiring, they're challenging, they're supporting me, they're listening to me. And then all of a sudden it just reboots the entire organization. And just even if you do that by 10, 15, even 2, like how does that represent as far as ROI is huge on a metric aspect of it. But as we come back to, we're just trying to create a stronger, better human that turns into humans that basically will change humanity and will be at a different level where we can really optimize communities, humanities to be on the forefront and the cutting edge of, let's see what our full potential is.
That's awesome, Ben. Yeah. And I have no doubt you guys will add a huge amount of value in that space. So it's exciting. Definitely. I'd love to finish, if you're happy, with a bit of a word association game, which we do, where I basically say 10 words and you just provide a 1-word answer if you're happy.
All right, let's try that.
Awesome, man. Okay. So the first word is creativity.
Must.
Stories.
Always.
Humans.
Connection.
Fun.
Play.
Risk.
Take.
Family.
Love.
Love.
Family.
Cirque.
Entertaining.
Purpose.
Must have.
We'll allow it. 2 words, but it's good. Ben, Thank you so much for today. It's been fantastic chatting to you. It's very rare that I think you get this this cross-pollination maybe from the arts into business. Sports, military tend to be a bit more mature in that space, but there's a huge amount that we can take away, and I personally have from today's conversation. So thank you very much for taking the time. Really enjoyed it. And maybe based off your answer to the last question, we could maybe do it in person next time.
That'd be great. No, thanks for having me, Henry. And hopefully some of the things resonated with some of the listeners. And again, we all find ourselves here. And the next time we're going to have a conversation, we're going to be also a little bit different. So there might be some additional things to share because we keep evolving. And if you're able to capture that and be willing to learn and explore, I think that's the beauty of life. We never know where we're going to go. So might as well take as much as possible while we're here and make better people better at what they do. And then from there, get inspired from them and then keep telling their stories. And round we go.
You said it. Yeah. And if people want to research or look into Liminal more, where could they find you guys?
They could find us at Liminal Collective or anywhere on LinkedIn or Instagram. We're there to find. We want to work with people that want to challenge themselves and want to get better, want to learn a little bit something. So explorers of life, and help them tell stories that will inspire the next generation and so on and so forth.
That's what it's about. Awesome, Ben. All right. Well, have a great rest of your day. Thanks for chatting, and we'll catch up soon.
All right. Thanks, Henry. You as well. Take care, man.
Hey, everyone. So I hope you enjoyed the conversation that I had with Ben. Certainly, there were some really interesting areas in regards to storytelling and how we can leverage the power of that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to break down 3 areas that I thought were really crucial to be able to take away from today and reflect on. So the first one is the importance of storytelling. And as Ben said, we're not all great storytellers, but we all have stories to tell. You need to understand who your people are and how to communicate with them to get the best out of them. And if you can figure that part out, then you're able to redefine what's possible in your company. And that is done through storytelling. Storytelling is how we make sense of ourselves, of the world, and of others. And the better we can understand these, the more likely we are to know how, when, where to make the moves that lead to success. So use storytelling to establish your company's origin story, the mission, the values, but also as a North Star, and to help you understand ultimately where you guys are going, what you're trying to create, and the journey along the way. People may be interested in the financial figures that you're hitting, but more often than not, they'll be deeply invested if they feel they're part of something bigger than themselves, and that's all done through storytelling. The next thing is harnessing creativity in what we now know to be a tech-rich world. We've got things like AI, but they don't directly enhance creativity. They can reframe ideas we have or potentially join dots that we haven't connected ourselves, but it's still a tool and it's dependent on how you use it. So if we can't just rely on technology to be creative, we need to know what actually creates the conditions for creativity. And so creativity is an outcome of the right conditions, not something you can simply force. Defining boundaries can actually enhance the creative process, as research has shown. So a few tips that Ben said for harnessing creativity. Firstly, get really specific about who you want and need to get involved in that process. Secondly, don't be afraid to change things depending on your new or evolving needs. Be open and adopt a beginner's or learner's mindset. And the third, give yourself a little bit of wiggle room or fudge factor at the end of projects. Don't tell anybody, but often you'll get 95% there, but there needs to be some space created between ideation and action. And it's a great way to stimulate that last little bit of creativity. So another thing that we spoke about was how to harness creativity in a tech-rich world. AI doesn't directly enhance creativity, but it can reframe ideas we have or join dots we haven't connected ourselves. But it's still a tool that is entirely dependent on how you use it. And creativity is an outcome of the right conditions, not something you can force. But there's a few things that Ben and I spoke about that are going to help you to be more creative in the environment you're in and collectively as a group. One of the first things is defining boundaries. When we create boundaries, it forces us to get more creative and actually enhances the creative process. And this is shown through all sorts of research. Other tips that Ben suggested are getting really specific about who you want or need to be involved in that creative process. Have a think here about diverse perspectives, not necessarily just having carbon copies all from the same team trying to solve the same problem. Another thing was not being afraid to change things depending on new or evolving needs. This reminds me of Pixar's Brain Trust, where they were constantly having new members join and some leave, but there was always a clear understanding of what they were there to do and it to be an open forum where people are able to speak openly and provide innovative suggestions. The last point Ben made was whenever you're actually in a creative process, give yourself a little bit of wiggle room or fudge factor at the end. Really, you need to create some space between ideation and action. If all you're doing is thinking something up and then having to act on it straight away, it's going to be far less likely that it's highly creative, and you're probably going to actually find a lot of the answers come to you when you're not thinking about them. So giving yourself the space to ideate before having to create action is a great way to stimulate that last little bit of creativity. The final thing that I'd like to talk about is building a collective identity. Ben spoke about the fact that our identity is multifaceted and evolves, but it's crucial as a human to not just have an individual identity, but as a member of something bigger than you. It's crucial to not just connect with your peers laterally, but also to the mission and company vertically. So as well as it being important for people to share their personal why, it's crucial to leverage storytelling collectively as a group. This will help you to understand who we are collectively and create deep connection to the mission and each other. And as Ben said, when you've got that in place, there's very few hurdles that you can't overcome. So I hope you enjoyed the conversation that I had with Ben today. For me personally, it just reinforced my understanding around the importance of storytelling and the fact that I need to continually improve and iterate on my ability to do it. I hope you had some takeaways yourselves, and as always, thanks very much for listening. This podcast was created for you, the listeners, so I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll catch up very soon.